I am Vanessa Quijano, Senior Vice President of Business Development at Invest Newark, where we ensure that we give businesses and the community access to knowledge, capital, land, and business opportunities. You can look for more information at investnewark.org. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Jerome Wakefield. He is the qualified purchasing agent for the City of Newark. He received his BA in criminal justice with high honors from Rutgers University of Newark and his Juris Doctorate from Seton Hall University School of Law, where he served as the visiting ambassador and president of the Black Law Student Association. During his tenure, the association earned the National and Regional Community Service Award. He clerked for Judge Verna Leith in Jersey City's Office of Public Defender. He served as intake specialist for American Civil Liberties Union of Newark. He represented juveniles as part of his clinical program participation in Seton Hall University School of Law's Center for Social Justice. He received the Outstanding Clinician Award in Juvenile Justice Program. Jerome Wakefield has also served as an adjunct instructor of substantive law for the Institute of Pre-Legal Studies. And Jerome Wakefield was also the co-founder of the Prisoner's Self-Help Legal Clinic at Seton Hall Law. Following his graduation from Seton Hall Law, Jerome served as assistant director at Delaney Hall and Toller Hall and as director of Kintock Community Resource Center. He is a certified offender workforce development specialist and global career development facilitator. Jerome Wakefield has served as chairman of the Newark Homeless Commission under Mayor Cory Booker and also as a coordinator of the Prisoner Reentry Program Opportunity Reconnect. From 2000 to 2016, he conducted a successful New Jersey bar prep program and also served as the chief of staff and managerial specialist to Corporation Counsel of the City of Newark. He currently serves as our qualified purchasing agent for the City of Newark, and he is assigned the authority, responsibility, and accountability for the purchasing activity for the city, including preparation of public advertising for bids, receiving bids for the provision of goods and services, and the awarding of contracts. So without further ado, I introduce you Jerome Wakefield.
Thank you, Vanessa, for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity again to present to the attendees and the participants today for the second session of Financial Fridays hosted by Invest Newark. And so to those of you that were with me last week, I say welcome again. And those of you here for the first time today, I say welcome. So this presentation that we've agreed to do with Invest Newark is in line with Mayor Baraka's Newark Forward vision and his mission of equitable opportunity and growth for all residents to enable them to live better and to have more productive lives. And so that's why we're participating, because we want you at the table. We want you contracting to do the delivery of services and the provision of goods for the city of Newark. Now, I'd like to start off with saying coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress, and working together is success. So we certainly want small minority Newark women vendors to do business with us. But as we discussed last time, there's certain requirements. So in the first segment of the Financial Fridays, hosted by Invest Newark, as I mentioned, we discussed the various methods of contracting with the City of Newark to provide goods or the performance of services. And that is the informal solicitation of quotes. It's bids under $44,000. Bids over $44,001, we have that's called bids. And then we have our request for proposals, which is RFPs, and emergency contract that I declare when there's an imminent need and it affects the public health, safety, and welfare. Well, another method that I should have discussed or been included is state contract, which is a quicker process because the state has already vetted and assign contracts and contract ID numbers. And the state has its own compliance and monitoring mechanisms. But we must, however, obtain municipal council approval in order for us to use a state contract. Vanessa, do you have the resolution for the state contract that you can display for me? Vanessa?
Yes, I'm bringing it up right now.
Okay.
No problem. All right. Bye.
I have the resolution from the City of Newark for the state contract.
I can't see it where I am.
Okay, it's the,
Can the audience see it? Okay, so I'm going to proceed even though I can't see it. But if you can see it, this is the resolution that we have to submit to municipal council in order for us to obtain authorization to use a state contract. And if they've identified, if they authorized it previously, then I don't have to seek authorization again. But generally to use a state contract, you have to have the authorization. You have to identify the state contract. The state gives out T numbers, the contract numbers, and they also identify their vendors. And those vendors have previously been selected and identified, right? So it's different from a regular bid, because in a regular bid, I'm required to advertise. I'm required to have competition and then to evaluate those bids. Here, the most of that's already been done. The vendors has already been selected by the state. They've been vetted by, and they have their own independent mechanism. And so that's why it's quicker to use a state contract. And if you're on a time limitation or you need it right away, it doesn't constitute an emergency, but if you need it right away, then you go through the state. Now, another thing that I promised last week was a list of the types of contracts we enter into and the types of goods and services we need. And so that's on our website now, which is newarknj.gov/central purchasing, so that you can then look at that and see the type of goods and services that we need. Okay. So, but today's mission and objective is to discuss how to properly and completely fill out forms for your bid submission to the city to ensure full and fair consideration of your bid and to avoid disqualification of your bid. So just as a reminder, right, of my recommendation from last week, in order to do business with the city, know the rules of doing business, stay informed, be prepared, and do your due diligence. All right. And so I want to go over these forms now. So the blank bid package is, as you see from the first page, I'm trying to do this without seeing it, and right now until I find it, it says bid proposal. And at the top of it, you'll see it has a date that the bid is done. It has the date that is advertised and the date that is due. And then you see it has my name. And then right next to it, it has a column that says bond waived, bond required. So in order to bid, sometimes a bid bond is required. And a bid bond, when required, is 10% of the bid that you make, the submission that you make, or 25,000 maximum, right? So for example, if your bid is 300,000, 10% of that is 30. But the statute says the maximum would be 20, so you still would only submit $20,000 for a bid bond, right? However, the bid bond allows you to submit a cashier's check, a money order, or a bond at the option of the vendor, right? And so when you get that bond, it's really saying, I'm going to bid on what you're offering. And if I win the bid, I will then submit a performance bond. Now, the performance bond is something that's covered for the person who's actually awarded the contract. For the duration of their contract, that bid bond stays there until performance is complete. Should there be a breach or something go awry, then the city has the ability to access that bond. That bond is issued by an authorized insurance or bonding company, of course. And so sometimes they will intercede and try to prevent a breach or a seizure of that money. And so they will try to get the vendor to comply or to perform as agreed to. So that's one issue there. Normally, when a person puts up a bid bond, bid bond, we will return the bid bond to the companies or vendors that have not won the bid. And then we will retain the bid bond for the winning awardees until we actually issue a contract. And then we return the bid bond and we secure a performance bond, right? Now, sometimes, depending on the nature of the good or service we're trying to obtain, and depending on the size of the amount, we will waive both a bid bond and a performance bond. And I usually do that in circumstances where I reach the conclusion that a bond would inhibit small minority vendors, and all vendors really, from competing, because sometimes finances pose a barrier, right? But then once we get past that, so when you look on the form, if it says waived, it's waived. If it says required, then you must submit it with your bid, right? The bid bond, that is. The performance bond, you must submit upon notification that you are the awardee of the contract. Okay, so Vanessa,
Yes,
can you talk to the group for just 1 second, because I'm still trying to pull this up because I'm at a disadvantage if I can't see it.
sure. So for everyone's reference, this is a blank bid proposal that we will be able to share with you after this presentation. As we went through the initial pages, the first cover page will show the bid proposal title at the bottom of the page, along with the bid due date. You can see that it is always at 10:15 a.m., but the date will change. Also, there is this notice to bidders. Please make sure that you read the legislation, but you will see that, again, the due date is referred to in the first paragraph with the time and where you would submit and place your bids. And then there is also the acknowledgement of receipt of information. There is different addenda that may be included with the different bids. So they will be listed here. And then you would acknowledge your receipt of those addenda. And then we then get to the page that Jerome started to explain to you, the bid proposal.
Okay, can you hear me, Vanessa?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm back in now.
Great.
So I want everyone to pay attention to the first page. And on it, it says the division of purchasing, and then it has a bid proposal title. So there, the title will go in. And then you'd have the bid due date that we would put in, right? And then on the second one, it tells you, because we actually have to advertise our bid. So it will tell you that, the purchasing agent on certain days, prevailing time, which is really Eastern Standard Time for us, we will place the bids and we will open them. And therefore, we'll put a time frame and we'll put a title there. Normally, in the City of Newark, we open at 10:15 on Thursdays, unless there's a reason for exception, right? If you get it in after 10:15, it will be rejected, right? We won't entertain the bid, okay? And so then we go to the next page, the third page, where it says acknowledgement of receipt of addenda, right? That means if I change something in a bid that I normally put out, I'm addending it, I'm amending it, I'm doing something, and so therefore I'm statutorily required to give notice to all the potential vendors that I have changed something, right? And the law says on the requirements that if you change something, you must notify them. And then once you notify them, when they submit their bid, they have to submit an acknowledgement of receipt of addenda. So that's what you're looking at, that form. This form must be submitted with your bid, whether or not the addenda was issued, right? And then you have to sign it, right? And then in the middle, you see it says no addenda was received. You check that box, and then you have to sign it. If you do not sign it and submit it, it is what we call a fatal defect. That means your bid is rejected automatically. So it would behoove you to please pay attention to that form and to sign it. Now we go to the next page. It's called bid proposal. And this is what I was referencing earlier. In the top left-hand corner, there would be a date and the name of the proposal. And then there's a buyer that I would assign in the office to handle the case or handle this particular purchase. So their name and their email will be there so you can contact them should you need to contact the division purchase for any reason, right? And then you look down, it says 1, that's the waiver I was talking about, the bid bond, 2, the performance bond. Now, underneath, it explains things that you need to know, right? Which is under the threshold. That's mean I'm not bidding, it's informal. The supervisors or directors are going to solicit your quotes informally, at least 2 of them, because what they're trying to achieve is under 44,000 for the year for any one type of article, right? That's called singular in character. And then you sign that. And so now, in light of covert activities and an attempt to avoid a risk contamination to ourselves, to the vendors, to the public, we're now authorized to do our bidding through Zoom or some technological method, right? So that page, the next page tells you where the Zoom's gonna happen, how do you get in on the Zoom, and then you must sign it, right? And then you can actually, it's of your choice, you can Zoom in that day of the bid, or you can just trust us to do the right thing. So then the next item is a bid document checklist, right? Checklist. This is a requirement. This is a requirement. So we're going to help you with the requirement because we're going to have X's in the boxes in the left side of what we actually want. If it's not checked with an X, we don't want it, right? Or it's not necessary at this time. Your obligation is on the right-hand side to initial each document on the checklist. That not only helps us, but it helps you to ensure that you made sure you put all the required documents in the bid package when you submit it, right? I can't tell you how many people forget to do that, forget to initial it, and forget to sign it, which is a problem, right? So this checklist, now here's the other thing. I'm gonna discuss it earlier, and I'm gonna have Vanessa pull up and display the statute on when you can reject bids, right? And so we'll explain that then. But right now, you should know that this checklist should be included. You should initial it. You should sign it with your name, print it, sign it, title, and date, and put it with your bid, right? Now, the next form is a statement of ownership disclosure. This is required by the state. This form, if not signed and submitted, is another automatic disqualification. So it's incumbent and imperative that you fill out this form and that you submit it with your bid. Now, the proper way to do it is, and it tells you right up top, but just follow, it's that easy. Reading is fundamental, right? You're going to put the name of your organization, you're going to put the address of your organization, and then you're going to tell me what kind of organization do you have.
by checking the appropriate box. Is it a sole proprietorship? Is it a nonprofit? Is it for profit? Is it a partnership? Is it limited? Right? And then you're going to look at one or two. It's going to tell me, one, the below contains the names of stockholders which own 10% or more. You have to do that, right? Or you're going to go the next one that says no one owns 10% or more. But if they do, you have to put their name in there, name of the individual, the entity, and give their home address, right? Now, there's more than one page for this document, right? So you then have to read it. If you have a direct or indirect parent entity, put it in that section there. List the names of each stockholder or partner owning 10% or more, put it in there. And then you finally have to certify it. And you put your full name, clearly printed, and your signature. Put your title, put your date. Now, I cannot tell you the number of bids that were disqualified because they failed to do something as simple as follow the instruction and fill out this form. And this is not a Wakefield requirement. This is not a central purchasing requirement. This is not a City of Newark requirement. This is statutorily required, and it's fatal if you don't submit it, right? So I've had people sign their name. They don't describe the organization. They don't describe the address. They don't tell what kind of thing, but they signed it. You understand? So it has to be fully and completely filled out, right? So please, this is one of those crucial, critical forms that when you submit a bid, you must have, or you will be automatically disqualified because it's considered fatally defective. Now, everyone doing business with the City of Newark must submit a business registration certificate, right? That certificate is from the state. It's free, but you have to have it, right? So there's a link on our website directly to the office that controls that, right? So you just go to the link and apply for the form. But what's the consequence of this form, right? That if you do not submit a BRC, we cannot contract with you. And then if we do contract with you somehow, we can't pay you. So it used to be in the past that you had to submit the BRC with your bid. But the law was changed and said, well, submit it with the award. That makes sense, right? Because we shouldn't really care about your BRC if we're not going to award you the contract, right? But so they changed it. But most bidders, in terms of timeliness and prudence, submit it with their bid if they have it, to avoid us having to look for it later and for it delay the process, right? So the suggestion or recommendation is send it with the bid. And then if you don't, you must send it once you are notified that there's an award, right? Now, we have what we call conditions governing the bid that we send out with every bid. And here it's called instruction to bidders and regulatory requirements, right? This is something that you have to read, right? Because it tells you when to accept bids. Your bids must be sealed, right? You don't just come throw some open envelope open and then we check it and then someone says, no, something was in it, something was out. So the bids must be sealed, and I don't open them, nor does any member of my staff open them until the actual bid date, right? And we can't do that until 10:15, a little after 10:15, because we had to make sure that everyone that could possibly get their bid in before 10:15 does so, right? Now, in COVID, we have times we have a drop box. And so you can drop your bid in the box, actually in our building at 8, which is currently 828 Broad Street. It is locked. We don't go into it. Well, I mean, we don't go into it until that week. And we look and we pull our bids. By 10 o'clock, if your bid is not in that box, which we check several times, then you must physically bring the bid upstairs, right? So that it can be considered. But it still must be brought upstairs before the deadline, 10:15. Now, these conditions and statutory requirements tell you that, you know, when you can withdraw a bid, that you can't submit more than one bid for the same advertisement or bid, right? And then it tells you about the proposals. there is a pay to play disclosure that companies have to tell of any contributions that they made, right? Any political contribution. So this is required. And it says if you receive contracts in excess of $50,000 in a calendar year, right? Business entities are responsible for determining their filing as necessary. You have to do that, right? It tells how you can get the packages. It also tells you we have the right to increase or decrease, right? You shall guarantee that items are free of defect when you give them to us, right? I'm kind of just going over, not reading every word, but these were available to you, and you can subsequently request a copy from me or the office if you need it. But the most important thing is when you actually get the package that's particular to the item that we're bidding, right? And so then you have to comply with all the regulations of the Secretary of Labor. So there's anti-kickback. You can't be paying people. You can't be saying, I give you this or you give me that. Those things are impermissible and illegal, right? Now, here are the things that I talked about, a bid guarantee. So if I don't waive it and a bid guarantee is required, then you have to submit it with your bid. But when you give a bid guarantee, it has to come with a consent of surety, right? That's a certificate, right? And it also has that consent of surety has to have the power of attorney, okay, for the full amount of the bid unless we waive it or we reduce it, right? So you have to ensure when you read that first page when I showed you up there about bid, if it says waive, you don't have to worry about this. But if it's not waived, then you need a bid guarantee, a consent of surety with the power of attorney. And then remember that the bid bond only says, I'm going to bid, and if I win, I'm going to give you a performance bond. Now, of course, this section tells you the successful bid simultaneously with the delivery of the executed contract, submit an executed bond. Okay, and then you follow that. And then there's other kind of bonds. I'm not going to bore you with it right now. These are rarely used unless it's a construction or some other contract, labor and material bond or a maintenance bond, right? But just understand that there's different kind of bonds, all right? And then we have the interpretation and addenda. I've already explained to you the addenda is fatal if you don't give a acknowledgement, right? Now, in bidding, statutorily, the vendor has a right to say 3 days prior to the bid, I need clarification, or I have this, I've detected a deficiency or something, and then we have to respond. And if we respond accordingly, then we may postpone the bid, we may issue an addenda. Those are the things that are possibilities, or we may say there's no problem, reading it fundamental, right? But if we do agree with you and have to make some change, then that addenda, that clarification has to be sent to every potential bidder, every bidder who already received a package, right? That way you put everybody on the same level playing field, right? Now, sometimes there's a discrepancy. And this must be because they might have rushed or they might not have, wrote in properly or read it properly, right? And so if you give me a number, if you say I'm bidding 400,000, and in writing it says 500,000, and that's a discrepancy, then the writing show what's binding on the bidder. All right. Now, another thing that I want to emphasize in bidding, right? And this usually happens to the new bidders or the small bidders, right? Please do not make any additional markings, right? People have a tendency to write something else they want, write something on the side of the bidding package, right? Probably thinking they're helping us to clarify, but that writing, that extra writing, that alteration makes their bid unacceptable or non-responsive, right? So, and it'll tell you that at the bottom of my package, it'll say, please do not alter. This will subject you to disqualification, right? Now, sometimes we have a pre-bid conference, depending on the size of the contract or depend on the nature of the contract. Like if it's cleaning buildings, for example, and we want you to come see the buildings to get some kind of idea of what you're building, we might have a pre-bid conference, right? sanitation or janitorial engineer, something like that. But generally, it will be checked off here. Conference required. Conference will not be held. Right now, normally we're not to dictate brand names, right? But the law allows you to do it sometimes because you're really supposed to give people the opportunity to provide whatever they can, right? So if they're used in this specification, they're only to acquaint you with the type of commodity, all right, that we're desired, right? But you can use something else if it clearly says that in the bid, all right? Now, the next one, and this is a very serious one, is insurance. Insurance indemnification. In some of the items, depending on the nature and the size of what we're asking for, insurance will be required. In the package, it will actually tell you what kind of insurance we need, whether it's primary, whether it's additional, whether it's workers' compensation, whether it's general liability, whether it's automobile, right? If there's no car, if there's no traveling, for us in it, you're not going to have automobile insurance, right? And so depending on the nature of it, we may not need workers' compensation insurance, right? So, but if we do, it's going to be checked off in this particular section, and it's going to tell you the amount, right? Now, generally, in these bids, the primary insurance shall be primary. That means your insurance with respect to the city, okay? It's employees, it's volunteers, it's programs, and it's and each project or location, right? But the city must be added as an additional insured. So we're going to have the language there, or your lawyer or your accountant can have it. The city is listed as additional insured for liability arising out of activities performed on behalf of the bidder. Okay, and so you have your language, and it must be included in there when you have your insurance that's submitted with your bid. Right? Also, generally, when you have insurance, there's a clause that you will indemnify. In other words, you'll pay, right? Or you will hold the city harmless. So if you indemnify and hold the city harmless, as agents, as officers, all of us, for any reason, for damages or costs, right? That indemnification is required. Usually it'll be checked off, and then you can have particular, it's like here, negligence, use of copyright, those kind of things, right? Now, go to the next section 6. We don't pay taxes because we're exempt from local, state, and federal taxes as a municipality, right? So when you put in a price, you can't say and tax this and put the tax amount, but that's not acceptable, right? Now, we have open-ended contracts where we don't know what, we know what we need, but we don't know how often we need it or how often you're going to deliver it. So that's an open-ended contract, right? So normally we'll try to identify you the estimated amount of each item, right, for the bid to recover. However, past experience showed that the amount ordered may be different from that submitted, right? This week we may need 100 of something. Next week it may be, 500 of something. As long as your total contract covers all of that, it's open-ended, right? Now, sometimes, not all the time, there are like particular licenses and permits that's required in order for you to do the particular job, whether it's demolition, whether it's electrical work, whether it's installation, whether it's the removal of a hazardous material. It's incumbent and it's your responsibility to get those licenses, right? And more often than not, the specification will identify that you have to obtain those, and it will identify those. And so it's your responsibility to get that, right? Now, each bid comes with a price sheet. Your price sheet is normally numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, identified. I need nails, size 2 inches, 4 inches, whatever, and then a price, and then it'd be unit, and then it'd be total price, right? Now, as I discussed earlier, and for the new individuals today, there's 3 requirements in determining who's the awardee of a bid. I'm talking about regular bids, and that is the lowest price. So I need you to put in that price in the unit. And then it's responsive. That means you did everything we told you to do without deviation, right? That's what we're covering today. Do these forms so that you're not disqualified, right? Responsive. And then finally, the third category is responsible. That means if you bid on this and you had the lowest price and you did it, supplied every form you're supposed to, the next question is, can you do the job? And so that it's the responsible determination, right? That means, do you have the equipment? Do you have the staff? Do you have the financial stability? Are you close in proximity? Whatever the elements are for us to determine that you are a responsible bidder, right? And so you will give a price that takes into consideration all of that, right? It shall be net. It shall include charges for packing, for crating, for containers, for transportation, whatever you have. Right? And no charges would be allowed for any transportation costs resulted from partial shipments made for that, right? All right, so now these statutory requirements, things that would knock you out the box, right? You have to have a mandatory affirmative action certification. That form is going to be in the bid package. You have to have a New Jersey anti-discrimination saying you're not going to discriminate in an employment, right? And you agree to abide by all anti-discriminatory laws, right? Not limited to those that's enunciated there, right? So these are forms that could knock you out. But you're going to have the forms in the package, right? This conditions here only telling you what we're anticipating, what's required, what's statutory, right? The American with Disabilities Act, you must comply. Right? You can't discriminate on the basis of that, right? Any of those things when you provide the goods or services, right? Discrimination is prohibited and you're required to comply, okay, with the requirements of the American Disabilities Act, right? And as it indicates here, you'll see that in attachment C. I've discussed previously ownership disclosure. The business registration is now due at the time of award, preferable to submit with the bid. And then emergency purchases of contracts, right? The emergency contracts, it tells you that under 40A, NJSA, New Jersey Statute Annotated, 40A 11-6, I'm authorized to declare emergencies, okay? When it's an imminent need for it and it affects the public health, safety, and welfare, right? But so the contractor shows provide the business registration certificate within 14 days for the date of the purchase or execution of the contract, right? Because emergencies are different and don't have the same time frame, right? So, but you still have to submit your BRC, okay? Now, also, they have to have American goods and product to be used where possible, which is the key word, where possible, right? Now, here's the section of the bidding process that if it's checked, and you see what this says? The following items are checked. They are mandatory requirements of the bid proposal and the contract, right? So I need a document list that we discussed earlier, right? I need a non-collusion affidavit, right? Now, this is an affidavit that says, I'm not colluding with anyone, any individual or any other bidder to get around the bidding laws, right? And sometimes we're required, not sometimes, but if we catch a violation, we're required to report it, right? So if people collude, right, to get around the bidding laws by underbidding, or they say, I'll bid high, you bid low, right? You'll get it this time and I'll get it next time. That's an impermissible collusion, okay? So you must submit an affidavit, right? So an affidavit means what? You have to have a sworn statement witnessed in front of a notary public, right? And signed and dated and have the notary stamp on it. However, in these COVID times, and because the difficulty there has been difficulty getting to notaries or been a risk to health, we now allow a certification in lieu, of an affidavit. However, that certification, and we give you the language in the package, must be signed. It must be clear, your signature, and it must certify that you're the person that have the authority to fill out this affidavit, right? It can't be anybody. It can't be the janitor walking down the hall and say, oh, sign this for me, sir. You know, a man, it has to do that, right? Now, the workers' right to know, community right in this position, it's not, right? Now, depending on what we're seeking, there could be prevailing wages as determined by the state, and they will have an accompanying determination letter. If that happens, this box would be checked, right? If it's a public work, right, and that's the demolition, construction, or repair of a public building, right, then you have to have a Public Works Contractor Registration Act, okay, certificate. However, if it's not one of those that require, we won't check that box right there, right? So this is I just want everybody to understand that this is a blank form, and so I'm giving an example of how it would look when it's needed, right? The DAFA investment prohibition. This is also a requirement form, right? Bidders and contractors with investments in Sudan public must reveal that, right? The next one, the disclosure is required and is needed if you have to disclose investments in Iran, all right? So that's a requirement. And normally, depending on what the bid is, you may have equipment certification. That's usually in construction, usually in engineering, like we have it in our lead service line program right now. Some of the bidders challenge other bidders. They say, hey, they didn't give us a equipment certification to you, and their bid should be disqualified, right? Because we have to have some assurance that not only can you do the job, but you have the equipment to do the job, right? But the law allows you to either own the equipment, lease the equipment, rent the equipment. So if you own it, you just certify you own it, right? But if you're, say, a subcontractor or you're renting the property, then the certification has to come from the person that owns it, right? Or that's leasing it to you, saying, hey, yeah, I'm leasing it to this person for this temporary period, right? And so they have to comply with the certification, equipment certification that's required, right? Now,
Jerome?
this is a crucial area in terms of a contract, right? The statute tells us that normally a contract is for 24 consecutive months, right? One exception is if it's professional service, then it's 12 months for that. So you have to look to see. Waste management is like 5 years. Energy, something like 45. But it varies, right? But we're allowed to, I mean, not allowed, we have to notify you of the length of the contract. And most contracts are for 24 consecutive months. And the 24 months start from the date that the contract is fully executed. Not the day you submit the bid, not the day we calculate who's the bidder, the winner, but after it goes through the full process and a contract is fully executed and signed by all parties, including you, the vendor, then it starts to 24, right? And the law also tells us, as I explained before, it's to the responsible bidder submitting the lowest bid and the responsive, right? Now, sometimes we can make bids, normally it's to one person, but if we give you advance notice, as I explained last week, then it could be multiple vendors for various reasons, right? It's like line item commodities. I might have 10 items in a bid that I want or need, and you only bid on 5. And the other company bids on 5, right? Or the other company bid on all 10, but 5 of those was higher than your 5. Then I can make a multiple award. But in order to do that, I have to have given prior notice in writing that it was an intention or plan of us to award contracts, right? Now, and we reserve the right to make award to multiple vendors, as the last statement says. Now, here's the statute that I was trying to tell you about. Vanessa has a one on the screen. I sent it, but since it's here, I'll use this. We may reject for the following reasons, and this is crucial. Okay. Now, when you look and you go into the statute, and this is my procurement Bible here, 40A11-13.2, it says if more than one bid is received from an individual, firm, or partnership, guess what? Under the same name, done. Reject that bid, right? Multiple bids received from an agent receiving competing bidders, right? Representing competing bidders, done. Rejected, right? That's the same thing as submitting more than one, right? The bid is inappropriately unbalanced. I mean, the numbers, nothing makes sense in that bid package, right? Now, the bidder is determined to possess prior negative experience, right? Now, that when you get to that point, though, you will have had notice, you've had an opportunity to respond, you've had notice to have a hearing, and then you're determined to have a prior negative experience. We don't just say, oh man, I don't like the way you did that. Your attitude was a little negative. But not how that. It's a whole process that affords you due process and things of that nature, right? And so we can reject it if you fail to enter a contract within 21 days, right? Except that it agree upon the parties, right? So what the statute allows us to do is say, hey, I need a little more time. I know you're supposed to enter this contract with 21 days, and I'm supposed to have it done in 60 days, but I can tell you literally and figuratively that normally doesn't happen because of the process. And so as long as there's agreement upon the parties, you can do that, right? Now, the city would, hold on a second, the city may also, excuse me, one second.
Jerome, as
So
we're Jerome, I just
it's
wanted
incumbent
to
on
Jerome.
you not to fall in any of these categories where you can be disqualified. Okay, so the bidder, if the successful bidder fails to enter into the contract in a timely fashion, they can get disqualified, right? And if we're not gonna use them because they failed to execute, then we can go to the next lowest bidder. That's the option of the city to go on to that, right? Then there's the criminal conviction. We do not reject bids out of hand because of a criminal conviction, but you must disclose it. Fail to disclose it when there is one, that's ground for automatic rejection. But if you disclose it, then we must look into the facts and circumstances of that, and you have an opportunity to present it, right? It's 30 years old, it's 20 years old. It's not for that kind of product or delivery, right? So any rejection based on prior conviction, it cannot take place unless there was a responsibility hearing by the city. And we have a process for notifying council and then giving you an opportunity to respond, okay? So people with criminal convictions can still bid depending on the nature of the criminal conviction or rehabilitation or time in between or lapse of time, right? Now, termination of contracts.
Jerome, if I
you
may.
violate any of those conditions of the contract, we can terminate it, right? And then we don't have an obligation to pay the balance of it if we properly terminate that contract, right? And you shall not be relieved of your duty to respond just because you contributed to it being terminated, right? So,
Jerome,
yes.
I just wanted to let you know that it's almost time. So I wanted to know if you think maybe we should continue next Friday, or if there's any
Tell me how much time I
specific
have
things.
now.
3 minutes.
Okay, let me speed along then.
I
Okay?
just want to make
Payment,
sure.
remember, we can't pay you if you don't have a BRC. If you don't have a AA 302, which is an AA certificate, right? So if you look at these documents in these are, because I pretty much went over all of them. You have to retain your records. We have to retain records, right? You have to have proof of your licensure, and then we will pay you. We have a prompt payment law and a city policy, right? But if you look through this, Exhibit A, we have it, Exhibit B. These are the things that I have described earlier, right? So you must fill out all these and look at them. You must sign it. This one is crucial, to consent to hold your bid. Generally, we have 60 days, but we can ask you, hey, if we don't get it done, will you consent to keep your price firm? And you say yes, right? So in that little blank where it says until, you put in, if you blank, it means it's unlimited until we get the job done. If you put in a specific date, then when that date comes, that bid is gone, and we can no longer rely on it, right? Some people mistake this form and they give it the same 60 days. So if I did it today, I would be 60 days from now. And if you told me that I can have January, the 13th, then 2021, you didn't give me anything beyond 20 days. So that's wrong. So that's where people make the mistakes. So as you can see, all of these documents have signature spots and dates. Please, please sign them and put in those dates. Non-collusion, you see the things that I referred to earlier? So when you go into these documents, now that's the full bid package, right? But understand this, bidding is competitive. Not only do I have a legal requirement to fairly consider your bids and to see that there's document compliant, but your competitor is looking too. And so they will require me to produce your record, or they will challenge said or you wrote in there and try to get you disqualified. And I can't tell you how many times that happens. It just continues to happen because they don't want you at the table and they don't want you to bid. So it's incumbent on you to do your due diligence, to read the document, and to submit the things that are required so that we don't mandatorily disqualify you or reject your bid. The main thing is starting out. As I said, this is part of the mayor's mission, okay? Because he wants small, local Newark businesses and community to access and secure public procurement and bidding opportunities, and certain things have to happen, right? So in doing that, I want you all to understand this when you come to the table. We want you at the table, but you have to be prepared. And so I'm going to leave you with these words. A dream written down with a date becomes a goal. A goal broken down into steps become a plan. A plan backed by action becomes a reality. Thank you again for the opportunity to present to you. And I'm sure there'll be other opportunities in the future. You connect with Invest Newark. Thank you again, Vanessa. I'm sorry for the little technological difficulty that we had delaying this, but I hope you've gotten something from this. But the takeaway from today's lesson is that these forms must be completed properly, accurately, and fully, so that you're not disqualified and so that your bid can get a full and fair consideration when it is submitted. And in these COVID times, I want you to understand too, and this is my final discussion, businesses are being closed down this week, and they're going to be closed down for a while, and they affect purchasing and procurement and services for the city unless they are essential. So therefore, I'm asking all of you to comply with the mandates of the city and the mayor to keep yourself, your business, and your family safe. If it says stay home, stay home. If it says be still, be still. We're not doing this because we just want to make people's lives and businesses miserable, but we want to keep the community alive. We want to curtail, maintain, and diminish the community spread. So I thank all of you for your participation. Thank you for your willingness to provide services or goods to the city of Newark, and your willingness to participate in a forum like this so we can learn how to do things properly so we can have that working relationship. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerome. Thank you. Sorry, we won't have time for questions at this time. What we will do is I will send the blank bid proposal package so you can review it on your own, the individual pages and sections that we reviewed earlier. We will have part 3 next week, so we can address some questions next week as well. Again, go to newarknj.gov/central purchasing for additional information, connections to all the different links, specifically the policies. Thank you very much, Jerome. We appreciate your knowledge, and being very open and candid as to all the things that we need to ensure that we complete and sign. Otherwise, it will be fatal. Any of your bid packages will be fatal. Jerome's email is wakefieldj@ci.newark.nj.us. You'll also find that on the Central Purchasing website. Just to finish up for today, just a reminder that if you have any further requests for assistance with COVID-19 funding, please email us at capitalconsulting@investnewark.org. Also, you can register for next week's session at investnewark.eventbrite.com. And we, as much as COVID-19 is putting up additional policies and restrictions, we are marketing our businesses to shop local through our Business Newark Saturday program. You'll be able to find businesses digitally through our website, our business directory. So please, as much as you can, support our local businesses. So thank you very much for joining us today, our part 2 of doing business with Newark of our Financial Fridays. Thank you so much, Jerome. We appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you. And please, all the participants, they can register their business with the City of Newark. So that when we do come out with bids that's appropriate to what they deliver or provide, they will get notice without having to wait for it to be advertised in the newspaper.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Please be safe and be well.